Karen won't take our son trick-or-treating, calling Halloween silly. Am I the jerk for insisting she lets him enjoy it? For weeks, my 7-year-old eldest Liam has been giddy with anticipation for Halloween. Convinced that trick-or-treating is the year's high point, he hasn't stopped talking about it. However, I must admit that I find the entire situation somewhat absurd. Although I am aware that Halloween is observed in other nations, it seems absurd to me that we live in Australia. I've never seen any decorations, and it's not customary here, at least not in our neighborhood. In fact, the few placards I've seen openly criticize Halloween because they believe it to be un-Australian. We haven't had a single trick-or-treater come on our door in the 5 years we've been here, but I still buy a large bag of candy every year just in case. Sorry, but it's just not something people do here, I have been saying to Liam. Liam's excitement peaked as Halloween drew near. He was asking to go trick-or-treating, practically jumping off the walls. I attempted to explain that it wasn't typical in this area, but he didn't seem to care. All he wanted to do was dress up and go candy hunting with his 5-year-old brother, Noah, who was just as excited. My wife, Alicia, flatly refused to take them when I brought it up to her. She sneered, "It's just a silly American tradition. I want to avoid wasting my time on it." I was annoyed. Alicia wouldn't even think about making things special for Liam, who was all fired up for something he perceived as amazing. I attempted to talk her out of it, but she refused to listen. She insisted, "I have better things to do." The issue was that I was unable to take them myself because I had a work trip planned that would take me away on Halloween. "Perhaps you could take them out for a short while. I recommend it." She gave a headshake. I simply failed to see the purpose. I would want to unwind at home. Halloween is nothing more than an exaggerated candy grab. I grew increasingly irritated the more I considered it. It felt unfair to deprive our children the opportunity to celebrate something that so many others get to, and I didn't want to start a fight. I began thinking that, even if it meant defying Alicia's desires, I should just take kids to a neighborhood where trick-or-treating is accepted. I finally said, "I can't believe you won't even consider it," after a long day of back and forth. "It's the only night of the year, so they're thrilled." Is this asking for too much? Alicia's face was set in defiance as she crossed her arms. "Perhaps you should have considered that before planning your trip if you truly care that much." "I'm not going to do it, it's absurd." Dejected, I took out my phone to research Halloween activities. Even if Alicia is reluctant, perhaps I could find a way to make it work if I couldn't take them. Update. At last, I discovered a neighborhood gathering that provided a secure environment for trick-or-treating. Since it's before I depart for my trip, I made the decision to take them there personally. Even if it meant getting some blowback from Alicia for defying her wishes, I couldn't wait to see the joy on their faces. This entire circumstance has been the final nail in the coffin. I eventually made the decision to inform Alicia that I wanted a divorce because I've been tired of her attitude for a long time. I'm currently cleaning up our house, which she essentially ruined before leaving to live with her sister, and she handled it about as well as I had anticipated. An old friend who once called me a bad influence for being child-free now wants me to house his family of 5. First and foremost, this is not an article in which I question whether or not I did the correct thing. I am confident that I did. This is a rant about an emotional day, and the only people who will understand are those who do not have children. The gist: Dave, not his real name, a former acquaintance with whom I had lost touch for nearly 3 years, has recently contacted me again. He claims he has a house emergency and has to locate a place for himself, his wife, and their 3 children to stay while their home is being repaired. This is the same person who told me he couldn't be my buddy when I was going through a horrific experience because I'd be a poor influence on his children because I'm childless. A little background. The friendship ended because I was stressed out and upset. My father's death was just one of several awful events that occurred over the course of 3 months. I was looking for comfort, but Dave told me that being childless was a detrimental effect on their family. At the time, he was married with 2 children. In short, they didn't want to spend time with me because I wasn't worth anything compared to their more valuable pals. This was someone I had known since graduate school, and we had spent a lot of time doing enjoyable things together. Like rock climbing. Dave and I were part of a group of common friends who frequently rented out lake cottages or winter lodges for summer and winter sporting activities. We've been pals for over 10 years, and he suddenly deserted me because he decided I wasn't useful. It ached a lot, especially while I was coping with some very tragic situations. Even more so because I was there for him when he learned his mother had cancer and again at her death. As I previously stated, I hadn't spoken or contacted him in nearly 3 years. I attributed it to people being really odd after they have kids, that they slip into a conventional, conservative mindset in which anyone who isn't wanting or working toward a Leave It to Beaver 2.5 kids situation is somehow questionable. Then today, I received a text message from Dave. I never deleted or disabled his phone number, so his name remained saved and there it was. He asked me to allow him and his 3 children to stay at my place since their water heater had broken, and it was an emergency situation. He knows I now live in the same city as him, and it would be a huge help. And here's the kicker. It appears that he and his wife had a 3rd child after telling me I was a terrible influence. Co-baby, I suppose. My main question was, why ask me of all people? I asked Dave why he wanted me to do this for him. His reaction was essentially that he is out of alternatives and no one else has room for him and his 3 children, especially his 5-month-old. I asked him why he couldn't book a hotel room for them. He stated it would be very expensive and that they are in a lot of medical debt because their newest child had to be in the NICU when he was born. I said it sounded challenging, but why me? He said he knew I helped someone with emergency lodging last year and noticed I had plenty of extra space for guests. Because I was so generous then, I could be generous with him now. I knew precisely what he was talking about, but I wanted to know how he knew it. That scenario was touchy, and I assumed it was a private family affair. He claimed it was put on Facebook by the people I assisted. Quick segue. Around this time last year, one of my good college friends, Kate, who has lupus, contracted COVID-19. She was also being very careful. It sucked because this was before immunizations were made available to vulnerable populations. She's my age, in her mid-30s, and aside from lupus, she's in excellent health. In fact, she runs marathons. Kate's lupus exacerbated COVID, and she ended up in the ICU. Furthermore, she was pregnant, and her husband had to choose between saving her life and protecting the fetus. It was basically a choice between providing Kate with life-saving medicine and care at the price of the fetus or having her die. Fortunately, her husband is a decent guy and allowed the doctors to terminate the pregnancy in order to save her life. Kate's mother was a nightmare, claiming her daughter should have perished with the baby. She even attempted to arrange for a priest to perform Kate's funeral rites while she was in a coma. As expected, this resulted in a massive, dramatic fallout. Kate's brother and his wife urgently needed a place to stay away from their mother. I had an extra room and am conveniently located near the hospital. They stayed with me for 2 days before securing a hotel room in one of those long-term residential hotels. Nobody was sure Kate would make it out alive, so they naturally wanted to be nearby. They lived out of state and were living with their cruel mother while their sister was in the hospital. Fortunately, Kate got it out alive and has since disowned her mother. While in a coma, she recalls hearing others discussing the priest's attempted break-in. I welcomed Kate's brother and his wife into my home because they were lovely people, had always been supportive, and are still among the most kind people I know. Apparently, unbeknownst to me because I don't use Facebook, Kate's brother or wife posted something about how nice I was to help them out in a time of need, a ray of sunshine in what had been a very dark era for them. They told me directly, but I had no idea they had published the matter on social media. Let's get back to today. Dave saw those things last year, remembered it, and assumed I would welcome his family and children into my home with open arms. Honestly, I told him to shove it. I was furious that he was attempting to shame me into allowing him and his family into my home for an indeterminate period of time. He knows I don't have children. He even said that my lack of children was a poor influence on his family, but now that it's convenient for him, I'm no longer a bad influence. Now he believes he can waltz back into my life without even apologizing for the horrific things he said 3 years ago. I explained to him that being child-free means I do not want children in my home for a lengthy period of time. If I did, I would not be child-free. I was not going to interrupt my life or my 2 cats only to be a bed and breakfast for his 3 children. He stated I was selfish and should worry about his children, and that there is no hot water in his house. I told him, tough. You can use a credit card or ask a family to pay for a hotel stay. He made additional excuses, bringing up their medical debt again, and assured me that it would just be for a few days. I informed him that many days for a damaged hot water heater seems exceedingly suspicious. Things like these can be corrected rather fast. I am aware of our state's residency regulations, and if someone stays in someone's home for 7 days, they are entitled to tenant rights. I wasn't going to risk this becoming a situation in which I couldn't get rid of them. He told me off and threatened to spread the word on social media that I wouldn't help a family of 3 in an emergency and that I wanted innocent kids to suffer. I instructed him to pound sand and eat a dick. He hasn't been a friend for many years. He doesn't even know my address. All he knows is that I live nearby in the same city and that I'm alone. He can slam me on social media all he wants. I'm not on Facebook, therefore I don't care what a group of Karens thinks of me. I told him that social media is not real life. If he tells my actual friends about this, they will laugh in his face. I have all of his texts as proof of how he spoke to me, and I told him he used to be a kind person. We spent a lot of good times together, and I'm still terrible about his mother. I'm sorry he chose this road in life since it sounds like he's miserable, but he's a negative influence in my life, therefore I can't have him around. I'm confident he'll understand because he said the same about me. That was the gist of my last words to him. He took off till I blocked him. I'm very sad about it. He used to be a good person 10 years ago and his mother was a gorgeous woman. I'm now bracing myself for any flying monkeys who may emerge from the woodwork and try to shame me into taking care of his family. I can't wait to tell them to take his family with them. I've already discussed the problem with my two best buddies. They were both astonished by Dave's bravado and lack of shame. They believed it was suspicious because he was so insistent on getting into my home for days. One acquaintance reported that her water heater broke recently, and she had a plumber come out the same day. It only took a day to fix. His opposition to the hotel plan raised a red flag for them, and they're curious about the whole situation. I agreed that there is a sense of absence. I feel righteous about all of this. I know I did the right thing. I resent that a past act of compassion was turned against me. Years ago I felt he had a point, that I was somehow unworthy because I was depressed, and people dislike sad people. But now that I see things clearly, I see that he had a deeply flawed personality. It did bring back old melancholy memories. Anyway, thanks for reading if you got all the way through. I needed to get this off my chest and rant. Update on Dave's water heater. An old friend, who once described me as a negative influence on his family, now wants me to house his family. Well, I'm pleased, and a bit shocked, that most issues have been rectified barely over 24 hours after they began. I suppose this is one of the benefits of having people working for you behind the scenes. I also wanted to thank everyone who interacted with my last post. I appreciate the encouragement and knew you'd understand my outburst. RIP to my inbox, but I read everything. And you all are the best Reddit community. No trolls, which I believe is a Reddit miracle. So on to the update. I'm writing this while drinking hot tea and I encourage you to do the same. This is going to be long. The deal. All of your gut instincts were correct. It was suspected that a damaged water heater would force a family of 5 to seek an alternative home, especially because Dave does not even have a water heater. It was all a lie. All of you go, I knew it. So here's the deal. Dave sold his house 6 months ago, and he and his wife Shelley have been looking for a larger home ever since. As I am writing this, they are already in a motel with their children. They have a lot of hot water. I imagine you all bobbing your heads up and down, saying, yep, I knew it. You requested an update because the water heater excuse sounded strange, so here it is. Seriously, grab yourself some tea. My sister, who is in another time zone and has a few hours on me, appears to be looking into Dave. Her spouse worked as a PI throughout graduate school, and she has a professional talent to find information about people. She's a little spooky but in a good way. She also uses social media, but I do not. I gave her Dave's complete name and some information I knew about him, such as his prior residence, his wife's name, and the names of his children. She went into town. She told me that his house went on the market around 6 months ago and sold swiftly for significantly more than it was purchased for years ago. It's a seller's market, and this was a big sale. I was like, oh, that's interesting. Then she stated she checked around the city and adjacent towns and couldn't locate any records of him purchasing further land. It appeared that his house had sold, but nothing further occurred. So I texted my 2 friends from yesterday, telling them what my sister discovered and that it appears Dave sold his house and no longer has a water heater problem, because he doesn't have one. My friends were asking, WTF? Allison, one of the 2 pals, contacted my sister, and the 2 embarked on a social media journey. My sister was scared I was being duped. Allison was a graduate school classmate of mine and Dave over a decade ago. She wasn't particularly close to him, and he wasn't on her radar, but she was one of his Facebook friends. We learned more after people friended absolutely everyone they knew on Facebook. Around the same time, I heard from Kate's brother and sister-in-law, who had remained with me while she was in the hospital. Kate's sister-in-law, Laura, expressed gratitude for my donation on Facebook. She confirmed that she had posted 2 pictures, one of my cat, who appeared to be laying down the home rules, and one of my large Monster Deliciosa plant, which she adored. You may extract information about my home from the images, such as the clean and spacious kitchen and the great pantry, which will be useful later. Laura was humiliated when I told her what was going on, and she realized she might have been somewhat to blame for Dave wanting to get into my house. She deleted the post, untagged my name and provided me with a screenshot to prove it. She even asked if she could assist with anything else. I told her that my sister was obviously doing a deep dive and could use some assistance. I put Laura in touch with my sister. Laura then allegedly contacted Allison at random, and late in the morning, Allison requested screenshots of the specific parts in the text discussion where Dave stated that his problem was with the water heater and that he wanted me to care for his family and children for a few days. I gave it to her, and there was radio silence for the majority of the day. I mused, I wonder what's going on. In the early evening, I learned a lot more about the story. My sister, Allison, and Laura sent me texts. I'm going to try to lay it out, even if it's a little circuitous. Dave and his wife Shelley sold their home 6 months ago. They want additional space and bedrooms for their now 3 children and wanted to upgrade. Because it was a tremendous and volatile seller's market, their home was projected to have gained high 6 figures in equity since they purchased it. They were thrilled to put it on the market. Dave and Shelley wanted to earn top cash for the house, so they sold it without a condition that they must purchase a home before the new buyer could move in and legally take possession. Dave was certain that with the large sale, they could acquire another one shortly. Their home sold quickly, and there was a bidding war. Dave bragged about it. He and Shelley tried to buy another home, but it was not easy. They were outbid on all of the residences for which they bid. When the new owners took over the house, they had to move out. Dave and Shelley didn't think this was a big deal. A friend took them in with the understanding that it would be temporary and that they would be actively looking for a home. They tried, but were still outbid. They refused to reduce their expectations or change their budget. They wouldn't look at properties the same size as their previous one because the whole point of selling was to buy a larger home. They couldn't win any of the bidding wars, and Dave refused to raise the budget. Their third child was born prematurely and was in the NICU, so they do have medical debt. Dave did not want to spend any more money or take out new debts. So Dave, Shelley, and the 3 children went to someone else's house to stay. They kept looking for homes but couldn't find one. This happened again, this time at a third person's house. At this point, people began encouraging him that it could be a good idea to wait out the housing bubble until it was no longer a seller's market and then get an apartment in the interim. Dave batted this down since he said that an apartment costs the same as a mortgage. If he's going to pay for living expenses each month, it better be a mortgage. He considered paying for an apartment to be a financial drain. Shelley became further enraged at the suggestion. She didn't want to live in an apartment that was smaller than their prior home. Dave's family appeared to be overstaying their welcome. People were growing annoyed, and Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries. Dave's family had now reached the 4th residence of folks offering to take them in. A month ago, they ran out of free housing alternatives. Hilariously, they were all sold out because people required the space for their own families visiting for the holidays. Nobody wants to take the freeloaders in anymore. Shelley is a city school teacher, and with the kids back in school, they felt compelled to remain in the city. Their only other possibilities for free accommodation were Dave's brother, who lives approximately 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither choice was ideal for Dave and Shelley's careers or for their children's access to in-person programs. Dave and his family needed to find housing right away, so they booked a motel. They were really upset because their children are loud, and the hotel personnel are constantly ordering them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley grumbled about how much they dislike living in hotels and how unfair it is that they can't afford a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have more than enough money to get by living in a hotel, which is still significantly more expensive than renting an apartment. Dave likes the notion of the hotel because there is no need to sign a lease. They can go at any moment, and they have maid service. Shelley gets all poor me, saying that the kids are sad because they don't have a backyard to play in, and that staying in a hotel prevents them from being kids. Slight segue. Allison went back through Shelley's posts and discovered an incident in which Shelley and a group of her pals were not very polite about me. This occurred at the beginning of the pandemic. It was back when everyone was panicking out and buying up all the toilet paper. People also purchased a large quantity of food before it could be refilled due to panic buying. In the early evening, I learned a lot more about the story. My sister, Allison, and Laura sent me texts. I'll try to explain it, even if it's a little circuitous. Dave and his wife Shelley sold their home 6 months ago. They want additional space and bedrooms for their now 3 children and wanted to upgrade. It was a hot seller's market, and their home was projected to have gained high 6 figures in equity since they purchased it. They were thrilled to put it on the market. Dave and Shelley wanted to achieve the highest possible price for their home, so they sold it without first purchasing a new one. Dave was confident that with the big sale, they could obtain another one fast. Their home sold quickly, and there was a bidding war. Dave bragged about it. He and Shelley attempted to purchase another property, but it was a difficult process. Every home they bid on was won by someone else who bid higher. Dave and Shelley had to leave their old house when the new owners moved in. They didn't believe it was such a huge thing at first. A friend took them in, assuming it would be temporary and that they would be actively looking for a home. They tried but were still outbid. They refused to reduce their expectations or change their budget. They would not consider homes that were the same size as their previous one because the whole point of selling was to move into a larger home. They could not win any bidding wars, and Dave refused to raise the budget. To make matters worse, their third child was delivered prematurely and required care in the NICU, resulting in medical debt. Dave did not want to spend more money or take out more debts. So Dave, Shelley, and the 3 children went to stay at someone else's house. They continued to look for a home but were unsuccessful. This pattern repeated when they went to a third person's house. People began encouraging Dave that it could be a good idea to wait out the housing bubble, when it was less of a seller's market, and get an apartment in the meanwhile. Dave rejected this since he claimed that renting an apartment costs as much as a mortgage. He figured that if he was going to pay for living expenses on a monthly basis, it should be for a mortgage. He viewed renting a flat as a financial drain. Shelley became further enraged at the suggestion. She did not want to live in an apartment that was smaller than their previous home. Dave's family had overstayed their welcome. People were growing annoyed, and Dave and Shelley refused to chip in for groceries. Dave's family was now in their 4th place to stay. A month ago, they ran out of free housing alternatives. Ironically, they were asked to leave because folks needed to make room for their own relatives visiting for the holidays. Nobody wants to take in freeloaders anymore. Shelley is a school teacher in the city, and now that their children are back in school, they need to stay in the city. However, their only other possibilities for free accommodation were Dave's brother, who lives 2 hours away, and Shelley's parents, who reside 6 hours away. Neither choice was ideal for Dave and Shelley's careers, nor for bringing their children to in-person lessons. So Dave and his family booked a hotel. They were very upset because their children were being loud, and the hotel personnel kept ordering them to be quieter. Dave and Shelley talked about how much they disliked living in a hotel and how unfair it was that they couldn't afford a house despite having so much money. To be clear, they have enough money to stay in a hotel, but it is still significantly more expensive than renting an apartment. Dave loved the hotel idea because they didn't have to sign a lease, could leave at any moment, and had maid service. Shelley began playing the victim, claiming that the kids were sad because they didn't have a backyard to play in and that staying in a hotel prevented them from being children. Meanwhile, Allison went back and uncovered posts from Shelley in which she and a group of pals were talking negatively about me. This occurred at the beginning of the pandemic, when people panicked and purchased items such as toilet paper and food. Someone I knew from graduate school contacted me to see how I was doing. I assumed she was approaching me to offer support and be kind, but her true intention was to ask for part of my food. I've always kept a well-stocked pantry, a tradition passed down from my grandmother, who survived World War II. This acquaintance knew I had a good supply of food and requested me to give her some because I didn't have any children to feed. She stated her child was a picky eater and that I probably have some frozen chicken on hand. I was astonished by her audacity and told her that if she needed food, she could go to a food bank. I was not going to simply hand her my lunch since her child only ate homemade chicken nuggets. There was no food scarcity, it was simply panic shopping. I suggested that she go to the grocery store early in the morning, when they usually refill, and she'd be able to obtain chicken. She labeled me selfish and brought it to social media, where she conversed behind my back with other spouses of graduate school colleagues. Back to Shelley, she sided with the woman who had tried to persuade me to give her my frozen chicken. Shelley also thought I was selfish for not assisting a mother out. She even commented that it was weird for me to keep so much food around while I lived alone, implying that I definitely had difficulties. If you guessed Dave's bad influence comment about me was planted by his wife, you'd be correct. When Laura posted about my generosity in allowing her and her husband to stay at my house for a few days while Kate was in the hospital, Shelley originally commented sweetly, stating how nice it was of me to do so and how lovely my home looked. But behind the scenes she wasn't as nice. Shelley's recent tweets moan about how sad her children are because they don't have a backyard to play in, and how staying in a hotel prevents them from being kids. Then, just 2 days ago, she tweeted about finding a new home for her family that was so cute and had a fantastic kitchen. Dave texted me unexpectedly after 3 years of no communication, claiming he had a damaged water heater and asking me to host his family for a few days. You all know I told him no. My pals noticed that Dave and Shelley made passive-aggressive comments on social media this morning about how bad society is nowadays when friends refuse to aid families in need. Shelley grumbled that their new home had fallen through and received a lot of sympathy from her Karen pals. She claimed her children were quite disappointed. I believe this is when Allison requested screenshots of Dave's water heater sob tale. Allison went on a tear, uploading the screenshots and revealing that Dave and Shelley never had a new home scenario planned. They were simply trying to influence me by lying. Regarding a damaged water heater, I had never agreed to having them stay in my home. Laura confronted them for attempting to take advantage of me. Allison went on a rage over the situation that occurred 3 years ago. My true friends, like Allison, were very supportive, whereas Dave was indifferent, saying, "Yeah, I don't care," and branding me a bad influence on his family. Allison informed everyone about Dave labeling me a terrible influence because of my child-free lifestyle, and how stupid it was for him to believe he could simply stroll back into someone's life after criticizing them. Allison, who is childless, found it particularly offensive. People began chastising Dave for being so nasty before requesting favors. People began calling him cheap and a leech, and the situation appeared to escalate. Some of the folks who had let his family stay with them for the previous 6 months came out of the woodwork to criticize him. One guest mentioned how filthy Dave's family was and how much extra cleaning they had to perform. They claimed his children had no manners, frightened their dogs, and that it was a relief when they eventually departed. People were outraged that Dave and Shelley had sought to deceive me and then portray me as the bad guy on social media. People I hadn't spoken with in a long time came out to defend me, telling Dave I was a decent person and reminded him of how I had helped them in graduate school. It was quite good to hear. Some even commented that I had helped them acquire jobs, which was more than Dave had ever done. I'm quite involved in the graduate school networking scene, and I appreciate sharing career prospects and mentoring others, especially those looking for scientific jobs. Even Dave's own brother expressed displeasure at Dave's behavior. He remembered how much I had helped them when their mother died and stated that if she knew how Dave treated others, she would be rolling in her grave. My sister ended up getting me on Zoom with her and screen sharing her display to show me what all the fuss was about. Perhaps this is why I never received mail accusing me of not allowing a family into my home. I expected some blowback, but I never received it. Oh God, schadenfreude. Dave had threatened to put me on blast on Facebook, but he ended up getting blasted himself. How ridiculous, how utterly idiotic. I have text messages from him lying about the goddamned water heater. He must have assumed that because I was not on social media, I would be unable to inform others that he was lying or that I would be unaware that he was truly enjoying hot water at his hotel. I feel like I escaped a nuclear-tipped rocket. After work, I had to pour myself a drink and ponder about it all. After examining everything, I believe Dave and Shelley intended to try to squat in my house. Dave went off when I cited the 7-day rule, which allows tenants to gain rights in our state. I felt something was fishy, and you all did too. I believe Dave was a cheap bastard who didn't want to pay extra for a hotel, didn't want to rent an apartment, and had exhausted all of his in-city free lodging options with pals. It was their last desperate attempt. Shelley knew I was welcoming to visitors, and they both knew my home was clean and well stocked with food for their children. They already had a reputation for eating people out of their homes. If they had stayed with me for a week, they would have been tenants, and I would have had to go through the legal process to evict them. It may have taken several months. It is much easier to con a single person and force them out of their own home than to try the same trick on friends with children and limited space. He was simply seeking for free housing so he could invest every dime he had towards his goal of purchasing a 4+ bedroom house with the proceeds from the sale of his previous home. I don't know for sure, but it makes sense. So I decided to send him one final SMS. I unblocked him and sent this message before reblocking his number. Hey Dave, I found out you were lying about the water heater. You don't even have one. You're staying in a hotel while sitting on a large sum of money from selling your old property. I think it's incredibly shady of you to lie to me and try to get into my home to leech off of me, especially since you wrecked our friendship by calling me a terrible influence on your family. I didn't tell you back then, but I'll tell you now, you are trash. Your mother would be embarrassed of you. I see it as all projection since you're a negative influence on not only my life but also the lives of others. If you truly believed that I was a terrible influence, you would not have attempted to bring your family into my home this week. But if you still think I'm a terrible influence, you won't have to worry about me aiding you or doing you any favors in the future. I will keep my evil influence away from your family. Oh, and Shelley appears to have become a genuine treat. Because I am not a monster, the final thing I will do for you is remind you that you must fulfill your responsibilities as a husband and father by providing a secure dwelling for your family. Stop playing those freeloader games. Here is a link to our local Craigslist housing page. I am confident you will find something. Oh, and I hope to see you at our next non-Zoom alumni event. I'm sure it will be wonderful to catch up in person. So it's finished. I said my piece. Once again, You were all correct. Something else was going on. I'm really sick right now. How could someone conceive of doing this to me? I'm also feeling ill at the thought of admitting them into my house. That would have been a nightmare.